Stress has been a dominating force in my life from the earliest I can remember. For me, perfectionism has always been one of my main stressors. My mom used to ground me from hair ties because I would throw fits when my hair wasn't laid perfectly. I used to sleep on top of my covers so I wouldn't wrinkle the sheets. And I would cry if one letter I wrote doing homework didn't look right. It's been hard reflecting on my past because I know I've adapted a better mindset, but I've struggled figuring out what has shaped me into the person I am today. This is the point where I'm supposed to tell you a story about how I had this epiphany, realized small things don't matter as much in the big picture, and I changed. A story about how I pushed those challenges out of sight, out of mind. But the problem is, I haven't. Stupid things like my sheets being wrinkled or my clothes not being folded right still exist as an itch in my brain. As college students, we all stress over homework deadlines, finding a parking spot, or waking up early for a class. These aren't life-threatening events, yet they still assert a lot of control over our well-beings. But the biggest thing that has helped me assert control over my stressors has been the realization that our resilience, continuing to push through those small challenges every day, is actually allowing our brains to grow. We all hear the notion to eliminate stress, but I'm here to tell you that stress is beneficial. Now, to go into the neurological background for this, stress can scientifically lead to brain growth. And when I say growth, I mean that literally. Neurogenesis, the brain's ability to produce new neurons, defined by Harvard Health, has been found to occur as a result of acute stress. To give you a glimpse into the psychology behind this, in a 2013 study led by Daniela Koffer, a researcher and professor in the Department of Neuroscience at UC Berkeley, rats were exposed to an acute stressor, which showed an increase in neurogenesis in a region of the brain known as the hippocampus. This finding was consistent with findings from previous studies conducted with similar stress paradigms. In Koffer's research discussion, she explains that inside the hippocampus, there's a subregion of the brain known as the dentate gyrus. The dentate gyrus contains a lot of our glucocorticoid receptors, or in English, our stress hormone receptors. This is the particular area of the brain where proliferation of new neurons occurs, even throughout adulthood. Now, a lot of our neurons are present at birth and are narrowed down in a process called synaptic pruning during early childhood. That's what makes the dentate gyrus so special. It's one of the only regions of the brain to produce new neurons throughout our lifespan, and it's all due to the stressors we deem so negative in the moment. Now, not only does stress cause growth in the hippocampus, but it also causes growth in an area of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex. In a study conducted on monkeys in the Stanford University Psychiatry Department, stress was found to increase the surface area of the prefrontal cortex, which importantly is also an area largely responsible for our ability to be resilient. This concept of stress aiding future resilience is referred to as stress inoculation, a term defined by the National Library of Medicine as exposure to stress itself promotes resilience to subsequent stressful episodes later in the life. Now, this growth within both the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex of the brain supports my overall conclusion that facing daily stressors is vital for our development into adaptable, resilient beings. In other words, stress is causing our brains to grow, which is what's allowing us to be resilient in the first place. This conclusion has led me to reach the broadened mindset I mentioned earlier. Although I still face similar stressors, how I deal with them has shifted. I used to become so overwhelmed with my emotions. They would take over any sort of control I had over my actions. Now I no longer let things like my hair, my handwriting, my sheets consume me. I've stood up to those small stressors, which has allowed me to move on to face larger challenges, such as moving hours away from home, choosing a career path, and getting involved in organizations here. ETSU has presented itself to me in the forms of both an obstacle and an outlet. Living in the same house my whole life and going to school with the same group of kids since kindergarten made the transition to college difficult for me. Adapting to a new environment, connecting with new people, exploring a new city are stressors a lot of college students experience. And as college students, we tend to overlook that simply coming to college is a huge measure of resilience. I appreciate that I've been able to construct a home for myself here, which has fueled my desire to help incoming students with their transitions, so I became an expedition leader. If you are unfamiliar with what we do as expedition leaders, we welcome prospective students to campus by giving them tours and relieving any anxiety they may be feeling by providing our personal stories. Through this organization, ETSU has therefore allowed me to use my resilience, however small it's stigmatized to be, to support others' resilience. Now, to get a little bit more vulnerable with you all, these past 2 semesters make up the hardest period of my life thus far. I'm sure we've all had days where everything that could go wrong goes wrong. Well, that's been every day for me lately. I haven't been enjoying life. I haven't been wanting to get out of bed for class or even social events, yet I've persisted. But I haven't been giving myself enough credit for continuing to get out of bed every morning and fulfilling my roles. I finally acknowledged those struggles and talked to my doctor, where she prescribed me antidepressants to help my brain produce the serotonin it lacked. Now, this all leads me to say that sometimes we might need a little help being resilient. And a lot of that has to do with the perspective you take. So now that I've placed a new level of significance on the stressors I encounter in my life, I'm asking you to reframe resilience in yours. Be proud of yourself, because you've all come this far. And everything you've accomplished to get here, large and small, is worth celebrating. Resilience is not just a product of grief or trauma. Resilience exists in your everyday lives. Every single one of you has a story to tell, full of resilience. And also a brain that might be a little bit bigger than it was before. Thank you.